Around 6 in the morning, we decided it was time to call it a night. You know, I had been drinking heavily, as well as my friends. I walked in my car and I put in the key in the ignition and I drove away. I only made it about 4 or 5 blocks. I was so drunk, I ended up running a red light. 2 cars coming from the opposite direction impacted my car on the passenger side. The car flipped over about 4 or 5 times. I was driving a Ford Explorer at the time. When my car finally came to a rest on the driver's side, I was basically laying in the street. The first thing I felt was blood pouring out all over me. And I realized immediately that, you know, my friend LJ was in the passenger seat. He was hurt pretty bad. I could see, you know, he was dangling there. He was bleeding profusely from his head. I just wanted to try and save his life, so I took off my shirt and I wrapped it around his head. And I held him there. I just started praying. You know, just hoping he would survive. And I started to look around. I could see my other friends. Some were injured, laying in the street. Some were still in the car, unconscious. I just kept thinking, what have I done? The police and the paramedics showed up and they forced me into an ambulance. They rushed me to the hospital. You know, it was like a scene from the show ER or a movie where all the nurses are hovered over you. They're screaming, where does it hurt? Where are you bleeding from? But I'll never forget what the one nurse whispered to the other. She said, it's not his blood. And a short while later, a state trooper and a nurse came in, they drew my blood. A while after that, a detective came in, he put a tape recorder down on the table and he said he had to ask me a few questions. Even though I think in my heart I already knew the answer, I had to ask him if LJ was alive. And he said, no, LJ is dead. I told him I couldn't speak to him. You know, I broke down on the spot. And a short while later, my family showed up. I was released to my family. I went home.
You were just listening to Matthew Connor, who at the time of the interview was an inmate at the Southern State Correctional Facility in Cumberland County, New Jersey.
By the time you watch this show, he'll most likely be out on parole.
Matthew Connor was incarcerated for vehicular manslaughter. He is trying to do what he can, even while in prison, to make amends for his offense. One way he does this is by telling his story.
He is a speaker for Project Pride, a New Jersey Department of Corrections program that brings minimum security inmates to schools to talk about their experiences.
Matthew is trying to repair the damage to those who were hurt and restore justice to the community.
Restorative Justice. That's what we'll be talking about today on Realfaith TV. Hi everyone, I'm Elias.
And I'm Caitlin.
Restorative Justice Online defines restorative justice as
a theory of justice that emphasizes repairing the harm caused or revealed by criminal behavior.
We'll hear more on Matthew's story and the steps he has taken to try to restore hope and justice to those who were hurt by his actions.
We'll also talk with our studio guests on this topic.
But first, let's go to the teens on the street and find out if they think people should, in addition to serving time,
should also try to make amends to their victims and the community.
Let's check it out.
So do you think people should only be punished by doing time in jail for their crime, or do you think they should also have to make amends, take steps to repair the harm they've caused?
I think they should make amends because, you know what I mean, they know what they did was wrong and they should do the right thing about it.
I feel like they should definitely be able to make amends and take steps to the harm that they caused so it could be a better learning experience, because just sending them off to prison, I don't feel like some people really get the message, because most people just come out and go right back. So I feel like if they put them into some type of program or, you know, really get counseling.
Definitely make amends.
Make amends as well as jail time, because they gotta feel like what they've done is wrong and kind of pay back.
They should definitely take time to repair the harm they caused. I believe another good way to, you know, not only punish someone but make it a learning experience for them is to community service.
I think both.
Yeah, me too.
I think that people should do time in jail and also maybe like up to, like if they did something to a family, like make up to them. I know someone who actually like burnt down someone's house like a few weeks ago, and he didn't go to jail, but he had to do like a lot of community service and he apologized to the family and whatnot.
It's all important. I mean, you want the victims to be better. You want
You want the offenders to be like normal citizens and contribute to society as like, you know, parts to the whole.
I definitely agree. I mean, I think people should, if they do commit a crime, they should go to jail, but afterwards, or even in jail, should go through a rehabilitation program to really fully grasp and, you know, rehabilitate themselves.
Right.
Let's meet our studio guests and find out what they think about this.
Okay, they are John, Keishi, Jordan, Phil, Vince, and Ashley.
So what do you guys think about this? Do you think that offenders should do more than just jail time?
I think community service is necessary for some people because people see community service as work that they're not getting paid for. So if they have to do something like that, then they might not commit a crime once they get out of jail again.
I think therapy also helps, helping them realize that they did something wrong and letting them feel the guilt but not letting them dwell in it allows them to realize, hey, I did this wrong, I shouldn't do it again.
I think both therapy and community service is good along with jail time.
It's kind of like when you get, like, you injure yourself and you go to physical therapy to rehabilitate your body, and it's the same thing with your mind.
You know, going off of that, even if you can't restore justice maybe outside the prison and do community service or something like that, in prison, taking steps to build yourself up, whether that be completing your GED or just helping other inmates that are in the prison with you.
And, you know, they have all these types of, you know, like we were saying, therapy and mental programs, and restorative programs are characterized by 4 key values.
One is encounter. This means to create opportunities for victims, offenders, and community members who want to meet to discuss the crime and its aftermath.
Next is amends, which expects offenders to take steps to repair the harm that they have caused.
Third is reintegration. This seeks to restore victims and offenders to whole, contributing members of society.
And lastly, inclusion. This provides opportunities for parties with a stake in a specific crime to participate in its resolution.
One of the practices of this theory is for the offender to identify and take steps to repair harm.
In this next segment, our spotlight guest, Matthew Connor, shares with us the damage that resulted from the night he got behind the wheel of a car while under the influence of alcohol.
The damage that was caused by my actions that night, I always say they're never ending. And first and foremost, my friend's gone. My friend's parents and his family don't have him anymore. You know, LJ was an only child. And, you know, he's never coming back. Still to this day, almost 7 years later, it's still hard to wrap my head around that fact that he's just gone. I can't imagine, you know, what it takes for his parents to still wrap their head around that fact. On top of that, you know, I had friends that were severely injured in the accident. My friend Matt had broken a vertebrae in his neck and his hip. My friend Steve had broken an arm and a leg. My other friends had minor injuries. I had minor injuries. The scene of the accident was so traumatic that the rescue workers needed counseling. You know, our families have been through this every step of the way with us. When I was 18, I lost a sister to illness. And watching my mom go through that, my family go through that, and then to turn around 4 years later and watch them go through this experience. I have to see them come into prison to visit their son or their friend or their brother, go through metal detectors and get searched just to see me. It's hard. It's hard to watch. It's hard to know, hard to see.
Well, that's a really heavy burden for one person to bear. Unfortunately, some of the damage that was done cannot be restored to the way it was. Like he said, LJ is not coming back.
And LJ's parents should take a big step in forgiving him.
On this topic of forgiveness, Auxiliary Bishop Gabino Zavella of Los Angeles stated that the challenge of the gospel message of forgiveness for victims is that's where the healing happens.
A person who offends also has to have the grace and the capacity to ask for forgiveness.
When these two things meet, we have restoration.
It's a messy process, but the alternative is fear, hatred, and divisiveness.
Next, we go back to Matthew's story as he tells us that the hardest thing he ever had to do was apologize to LJ's parents.
A day or two after I got home, I had to do the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. That was face LJ's parents. I had known LJ since the 4th grade. We grew up playing sports together, basketball and baseball. His dad used to be my grade school basketball coach. His mom was a teacher in my grade school. When I was a little kid, I used to play basketball in his front yard. So to face them was just an unbelievably daunting task. But somehow they found it in their hearts to forgive me. I had a terrible time dealing with this, especially immediately after the accident. I was in a state of shock, depression, the shame and the guilt that came with being responsible for this was almost unbearable. I think one of the reasons I was able to come out of that was because of them. I can't imagine if it was the other way around. I was already at my lowest point, so I can't imagine if they had different feelings towards me. I can't imagine going any lower than I already was. If I could sit down with LJ's parents, I would just like to say to them that I hope that they realize that, I'm doing this first and foremost to honor LJ, that I still think about LJ every day. I still think about them every day. I still think about that night every day. That despite however long, we may go without speaking or contact, they're never forgotten and their son's never forgotten. My hope for LJ's family is just that this doesn't torment them every day. I can't imagine still to this day what it's like living their life, with this hole in it. I just hope that somehow they've managed to some kind of peace in their life.
I can't imagine holding so much grief. And someone like Matthew does seem truly sorry. You can see the remorse in his eyes. And we just have to remember, people on the outside think that those in prison are hardened criminals and they have no grief and they have no sorrow, but they truly do. And when they try to re-enter society, we have to be accepting of them and understand that they're just trying to make amends and start their life over. It's not just about changing their thinking, but about changing our thinking as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ashley. I do think that a definite opinion has been set about people who commit crimes. And sometimes the people on the outside who don't understand the guilt and the grief and the emotions that are attached sometimes become a little biased about it. But I do think that, restoring the restorative justice, I think that forgiveness does help to get rid of that haunting feeling of these memories. They might not go away, but it gives some sort of relief.
Vince, how you're talking about forgiveness as being a way maybe to find some peace or inner peace about what had happened. I can't imagine being LJ's parents, growing up knowing Matthew his entire life and then having this happen. And I just think that shows how beautiful it is that they were able to forgive him and to move on from that segment into the healing process.
It takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to apologize for doing something like that. But it takes even more strength to forgive someone, because let's think about it. LJ was taken from his parents. That's a big thing. It was their son and he's gone, their only son, and he's gone. It takes a lot to forgive someone for something like that. And it truly shows how human and how, great that those people are, because they were just willing to say, all right, we forgive you. It's hard, but yes, we forgive you.
I can imagine being a person like Matthew and growing up with LJ, knowing him my whole life, and also being very close with his parents and having to look them in the face and say, you know, I'm sorry for taking your only child away from you, and knowing that it was my fault that they will never be able to see their son again.
I think both Matt and LJ's parents are just very strong people. So is it worth the investment of society to try to rehabilitate offenders?
Or should we just lock them up and throw away the key?
Let's see what the teens on the street had to say about this.
If you have a person who really feels bad for what they did and their crime, then they should have the choice to be rehabilitated.
Yeah, because people can make mistakes, and after they do their mistakes, they can not redo them because they don't want to go through the things that they got in jail.
I think everyone deserves a second chance, and if they see what they've done is wrong and they're ready to change.
That's kind of a touchy subject because it depends on what they did. If they was locked up for murder, I don't think they should have a chance because they know they took a life and they should deal with that. But if it's something small, I'm not saying it's a small charge like drugs or something, but I mean, I think they should have a second chance.
Prison is in place to, kind of help develop things and help them push and make changes and become better people, and to, that's what the goal is supposed to be.
Rehabilitation is obviously what jail is supposed to be.
You don't want to just release the same exact person back into society. You want to make them into better people and make sure that they're ready to be around everyone else.
Like I said, maybe everybody deserves a second chance. And if they treat them the right way, because maybe they'll help the community again.
What is your opinion on this? Do you think there should be attempts to rehabilitate offenders?
One of the teens on the street said that you don't want to release the same person who committed the crime back into the streets. I think it's more of, if you think about it from the perspective, there's a reason they committed that crime. Acknowledge the reason, talk about the reason, identify it, and then work on it. So this way, once they come out of prison, hopefully there is some kind of change in their behavior.
They need help to realize what they did was wrong, and they need to grow from that experience.
It certainly takes a lot of time, effort, money, and patience to properly rehabilitate a criminal. But if you think about it, it's going to take even more work if they make the same mistake and then re-enter prison, and our prisons become a revolving door. So we have to adequately rehabilitate them the first time.
In the next segment, Matt's going to tell us how he's working to repair the damage that his actions caused.
Some things I've done to try to repair the damage that I've caused is really try to spread the message to young kids that, just like me, who don't think it will happen to them. That was one of my biggest things when I was younger. I thought it will never happen to me. I had people warning me about drinking and driving, partying. I had speakers come to my school and talk about drugs and alcohol and the consequences, but I thought that'll never be me. So my goal is to tell my story to these kids, teenagers, high school students, and even adults, because it's a message that can be carried. But hopefully my story will touch somebody. My story will make them think twice about drinking and driving. My grand goal is to save some lives or prevent something similar that happened to me to happen to them. I always say I don't want them to have to experience what I've experienced. I don't want anyone's parents to have to experience what LJ's parents experienced.
Part of Matthew's attempt to repair the damage and make amends is to continue telling his story to young people.
He also hopes to write a book to spread the word even more.
Well, Matthew's story is really difficult to listen to, but it's especially difficult for me because I had a friend die in a drunk driving accident this past year. He was with another friend. They were at a party having a really great time. Thought they were invincible like most teens did, didn't think they were too intoxicated to drive, and they went down a dark, winding road and had a really horrible accident. And the friend of mine that passed away, he was so well loved in the community. He was a great athlete, an amazing student, just a wonderful person. And it was really difficult to get over his death and accept what happened. And so many people were angry at the driver because they thought it was an accident that could have been avoided. But this driver apologized to the school, to everyone in the community, and he was truly remorseful for what he had done. And the most beautiful thing happened. The whole community came together to support him and get him through this tough time because he was grieving along with the rest of us. The friend was also a friend of his. Positive things can come out of tragedy, and our community is stronger because of what happened.
And I think that's so important that there is that sense of community and the group. And what I loved that Matthew said was how he's talking about is he wants to save lives by telling his story.
The organization I'm part of, a lot of the counselors there have rehabilitated their lives, have come around from bad places in their lives, and now they've dedicated their lives to educating children in skills in different life, in things, how to have positive relationships and be responsible and be respectful. And I think that's just absolutely wonderful.
So obviously the love that a community or friends and family can give to someone could definitely restore hope and justice in the community.
All right. In a statement titled, "Let Justice and Mercy Meet," the Catholic bishops of Louisiana said,
"We are challenged to cross the threshold of hope.
This hope is not based merely on our own poor efforts, but on the God who is always faithful.
We know that in the face of sin and death, Jesus Christ took them into himself and conquered them by love.
It is this love which heals the deepest wounds and transforms our brokenness so that we may walk in his ways."
Next, Matthew tells us how the awareness of God's forgiveness has helped to heal his brokenness and made it possible for him to forgive himself.
I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. I believed in God. But there were times where I felt like I may have been just going through the motions. Throughout this experience after the accident, coming to prison, it's sort of broken me down to my smallest. I've used prayer, faith in God to help, bring me back up. You can use a tragedy as a crutch to hold on to the rest of your life and feel sorry for yourself. And there were times where I felt sorry for myself. Or you could use it as fuel to help people, fuel to make a difference. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. I have faith that I was put on this earth by God to make a difference. I have faith that, God wants me to do good things, to bring a positive out of this negative that I've experienced. I think knowing that not only LJ's parents, but God has forgiven me has been very important. Knowing and believing that God is all forgiving, and that if we are truly sorry in our hearts, that God can forgive us for anything, has really helped me. It's helped me to forgive myself, which was probably the hardest thing to do. It's helped me come to terms with this whole experience.
Well, that one night changed his whole life forever. So he had major faith in God, and that he knew that God forgave him, so he had to forgive himself.
Going to confession is such an important part of it, that you can forgive yourself and others can forgive you, but feeling that forgiveness from God, I think, really can cap everything off.
It's going to take time to come to that conclusion, even if you have a strong religious background, because I think understanding that God forgives you at all times also involves you feeling it personally. And I think reflection on that can bring you closer to God.
Even though it seems impossible, God will always love you, and if you're truly sorry, he will forgive you for what you've done.
Also, believing in God and knowing that he is there to support you and that he's your backbone also helps you forgive yourself and take on the healing process.
Restorative justice definitely encompasses so many things, and forgiveness requires a lot of power and strength. But we just have to remember that the Lord is that source of power. We have to continuously pray for his grace.
Unfortunately, we can't turn back time and undo the harmful acts we commit.
But acknowledging our regret and saying that we are sorry is a good starting point to move those who were hurt toward healing.
As Christians, we are called to be peacemakers. We should do all we can whenever possible to restore justice and peace.
Some of the hurt is so deep that we can't do it alone. We need the support of our friends, family, and most importantly, God.
The sacraments of reconciliation and the Eucharist are real encounters with Jesus that can help us to move in the direction of healing.
What are your views on criminal justice in our country?
Do you believe in restorative justice?
We'd like to know. Contact us through our website.
The address is www.realfaithtv.com.
Or you can call us at 609-406-7402.
And we'll leave you today with this final thought from Isaiah chapter 56.
Thus says the Lord, observe what is right, do what is just.
For my salvation is about to come, my justice about to be revealed.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Realfaith TV.
God bless.